Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us today. My name is Eric. I'm the account manager at Connecting Up in TechSoup New Zealand. We're part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through the creative use of technology. For those of you that haven't attended a webinar session with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand help facilitate training through online webinars, workshops, boot camps, and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all digital areas. You can check out our training and events section on the website for more information there. Today, I'm really excited to welcome you to join today's webinar, which is how to make your donors' money go further, which is being presented by Adam Thomas, the co-founder of Oblu. Adam is a senior procurement professional with broad experience delivering strategy and implementation across the supplier lifecycle, including sourcing, contracting, supplier relationship management, spend optimization, and digital procurement. Now, before we get into things, just a little bit of housekeeping from myself. All the lines are going to be muted, so if you've got any questions, type them into the questions box, and they'll appear on my screen just off to the side here. If you've got any technical issues, I'll do my best to help troubleshoot those with you during the session. If you've got any questions, please also type them into that questions box. We'll be stopping for questions as the webinar goes on, and there aren't any silly questions you can ask, so don't worry about it. They'll appear to me, I'll be able to read them out to Adam, and we can go through them as they come in. We do love interactive sessions, so please ask any questions as you see fit. Now, if you're on a Wi-Fi connection and you've got other programs open, just close those down if you can. That'll just help you have the best audio and video connection that you can get, and will probably improve the quality of the webinar there for you. Final note from myself, this webinar is being recorded, so you will get a copy of the recording and you'll get a copy of the slide deck as well. So don't worry about that. If you want to go back and look over anything, you'll be able to do that in your own time, and that should be uploaded likely tomorrow for you all. Finally, there'll be a short survey at the end of the webinar, so if there's any feedback that you can give us, it'd be great if you could fill that out. Otherwise, that is it for me. I will hand it over to Adam now.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning. Morning for me. It's 1 o'clock in the morning here in London. Hope everyone's doing well. So thank you very much for having me this morning. What I'd like to do is to hopefully teach you guys a little bit about procurement and what you can do to make your donors' dollars go that much further by actually managing the various parts of the procurement process. So if we look here at what I've got coming up, we're going to be looking at the purchasing versus procurement, tactical versus strategic, the sourcing of goods and services, and then the next part of the process, which is contract management, supplier management, and savings management, and that's all cyclical. We'll then look at seeing how you can actually make it happen yourselves, and then we're going to look at digital solutions, and I'll then give you a quick view of Oblu and what we're doing here and how Oblu could potentially help yourselves. So let's look at purchasing versus procurement. I mean, you can see here effective management of third-party spend can on average release savings of between 7 and 12%, which obviously has a direct impact on the bottom line. Now, if you imagine you've got a turnover of $1 million and you could save yourself $70,000 or $120,000, and put that back into your frontline delivery, imagine what impact that would have on the beneficiaries of your charities and nonprofits. Would be immense. So let's look at purchasing. Purchasing is the process of effectively going in and finding something you want to purchase, want to buy, and you're then going in and making that decision and buying it. Now, in a business perspective, I guess context, that would mean that you're raising a purchase order. You're then going out, and that's been sent to that's been approved. It's then been sent to the supplier. Supplier is then delivering. It's then being paid. Now, that's just very tactical, and then you've then got procurement, which is far more strategic. It's looking at the whole process. So I give it an example, an everyday example that would affect yourselves and everyone else would be buying a mobile phone contract. If you were to get a new mobile phone contract, you would go and look at the various different networks. You would go and look at the various different phones that were provided. You would then break it down. You would have a look at, well, how many calls am I making? How many texts am I sending? And more importantly, how much data am I using on a monthly basis? And you would then have an idea of exactly what you're looking for. You would then go out to the vendors, and depending on what they were offering you, depending on what the data bundle they were offering you, etc., you would then make a decision on that, and you would then choose the one that is the most suitable for you. And then going beyond that, you would then obviously sign the contract. The contract would more likely be for 24 months. You would manage that coming up towards the end of the contract. You'd go out and you'd repeat the whole process all over again. So I think what I'm trying to do there is with procurement is show that you're already doing it, and it's not something that's scary at all, and everyone's doing it in their everyday lives. So the first part of the process is sourcing goods and services. Pretty much like I just said with the example there, I mean, the steps in the process are what exactly is required. The more specific you can be when you're going out and tendering, as it were, the better the response you'll get from the suppliers that you're going to. If you can tell them the volumes you're looking for, specifications of exactly what you're looking for, just with the mobile example there, how much data you're using per person, the more accurate, the better that they can be with their response to you. The next part then is deciding what represents best value, and what represents best value is going to differ from person to person. I'm just going to jump forward a slide a minute. So best value, is it based on the cost? Am I going for the cheapest option? Am I going for quality? Obviously, the higher the quality, the more the cost is going to be. Now that's going to depend on what exactly you're looking for. If it's energy, energy's energy. If it's something that, you know, potentially is going to have an impact and you're going to use far more of them because the quality is not there, then that's something that needs to be bear in mind. ESG is now becoming more and more important from an environmental, social, and corporate governance. And obviously, as non-profits, charities, the social aspect is very important. It might be that you want to work with suppliers who support your particular charity or a bit active in that area. So these are what, you know, I guess we call your values. It's whatever's important to you or your organization, and it's making sure that you're aware of those, that you communicate those to the suppliers, and that that's what you're going to compare the suppliers against. Let's go back to the process there. So that's what represents best value. Then the last part of this is which suppliers do you go to? It might be suppliers that you've worked with currently, might be the incumbent, and that's often a good way of doing it, is going to the incumbent. It might be suppliers that somebody's recommended to you. It might be suppliers you've gone and found on the internet. I would go to at least 3 suppliers, so you've got a spread of the quotes. So you might go from, you know, it might be cheap, it might go very expensive, but it gives you then a choice as to what you're doing. The next part, once you've obviously got those responses from the suppliers, is to evaluate them. And that's where your values come in, and it might be all about cost, it might be about ESG, it might be about quality, but that's up to you. And it's something obviously that's going to be, I guess, sort of weighted average. It's something that you might either be doing on yourself, or you might be doing collectively or collaboratively with colleagues. Once then you've then done that, you can then get the top 1, top 2, and get them in, potentially get them to have calls with them. You can then have go through that shortlist, and then you can then negotiate before awarding the contract to them. And at that point, the negotiation, a lot of companies will be standard terms and conditions, but you need to make sure you're aware of what is expected of you, so that you don't get any nasty surprises. And then the last part of that process then is obviously the implementation. Now, the suppliers have been doing it for many years, and they've worked with many clients like yourselves previously. So it's then getting them to come in and teach you and show you the best way of getting it implemented, so you'll get the benefit from it immediately. So we've got some tips here for sourcing, and these are applicable for anything that your goods or services you're working on. Obviously, one of the most important parts, if you're going to be going out there and running sourcing activities, is to make sure that the internal stakeholders, be they the bosses or accounts or the users, are actually involved in this, because the more that they're involved, the more likelihood it is to be successful. You could go and run the best sourcing activity in the world, but if nobody will then use the goods or service, it's obviously a waste of your time and waste of the supplier's time. As I mentioned earlier, you know, you need to be as precise as possible when you're going out and running a sourcing activity. Now, that's a great opportunity then when you're looking at what you require, to actually then look to identify efficiencies and reduce waste and redundancy. It might be that you're buying 10 times as much as you need, and you can then go and identify a product that's going to be much better, much more efficient, or that you can find a new way of doing it yourselves. Again, as I said, provide the details of the response to the suppliers. The more detailed you are, the more information you can give them, the better the chance you have of them giving you what's exactly right for you. Talking about the values, you need to be clear on exactly what's important to you, how you're going to assess those suppliers when they respond, so that you can then turn around and then it's an objective rather than a subjective evaluation of the suppliers. Then when you've actually got to the stage of almost being there and choosing the supplier, you've got to negotiate. You can ask for whatever you want within reason. I think it's one of those things over the years of working in procurement, I've been surprised at what I've been able to get away with, not get away with, but being able to ask of suppliers, and they've then been able to provide beyond perhaps then the normal goods and services. One of the key things, obviously, is then when you've got a contract, before signing it, is to make sure you're fully aware of what your obligations are and also what the obligations of the supplier are. From the supplier's perspective, it will be SLA to its services, and it's important that you know what's expected of them, and importantly, what's expected of you. It might be key dates for giving notice, and we'll go on to that in a minute in contract management. But you need to, or it might be payment terms, but you need to be aware of what's expected of you. Now, one of the most important things of any, I guess, business relationship is actually treating the suppliers as you'd like your own staff to be treated. Now, as I say, working for years in procurement, the number of times I've seen people, I guess, behave in a disrespectful fashion to suppliers, and it's not good. I mean, one of the most important things, if you've got suppliers that you invite to a sourcing activity, and if they're unsuccessful, is giving them feedback and explaining why they've been unsuccessful, so that the next time they spend time and effort trying to win somebody's business, they've got a better chance of achieving that. And then the last tip here is, as I said earlier, the procurement cycle is to make sure that actually you run the sourcing activity, with enough time before the end of the contract, so that you're going out there and you're being proactive in finding the suppliers or the new supply, rather than if you leave it to the last minute, you're more than likely going to stay with the incumbent, and it might be the incumbent's not necessarily the best, so you're putting up with second best because you haven't taken the time to be proactive and go out there. That's the end of the bit on sourcing. Any questions at all?
We haven't got any questions yet, Adam, but if anyone's got any, feel free to put them in the questions box and we'll pass it on in the next break.
Please don't be shy, guys. It's kind of it's difficult when I'm looking at a camera and a screen. Normally, when you're presenting in a room, you can get feedback from people and you can ask people, but it's please do ask questions. And then the next part of the process is the contract management. And contract management is there is a huge opportunity to save money here by just doing some very, very simple things. When we look at this quote here, the average company loses about 9% of annual revenue due to poor contract management practices. And with typical profit margins hovering around 10%, even halving this can increase profit margins by 50%. Now, I think when you think about that, it does show the power of doing any part of this process and doing it well. Even if you're just doing small parts of it, that's going to have a positive impact and provide more money and make your donors' dollars go that much further. So with contract management, effectively what that is, it's creating a contract repository. Now that might be in an Excel spreadsheet, it might be in a shared drive, but what you're doing is capturing then the key information about the contract, what about the suppliers. You're making sure that you've got any key dates there, and the key dates normally are obviously the end date, a notice period. So from experience with notice periods, if you don't give a notice period, you can find contracts auto renewing, which can be expensive. And obviously at the end of a contract, if you're doing the sourcing activity, again, it's an opportunity for you to look at, I'm buying this goods or service. Can I tweak that? Can I change my processes? Can I reduce what I'm buying? Is there redundancy? So it is really, really important that you keep on top of those dates, both the end date and also any notice period, because the last thing you want to do is have a contract auto renew. I had a client a few years ago in Europe, and the particular laws there were that if a contract auto-renewed, it renewed for the whole of the initial term. In this time, it was photocopiers, and it was 5 years. Fortunately, the supplier was decent, and we had a negotiation, and the client was happy with the service they were receiving. Otherwise, it could have been very messy. The other thing, obviously, with any contracts is you've got contract documents, and it's important that you have easy access to those. They're not put away in drawers somewhere and never seen again, because you need to know exactly, as I mentioned earlier, you need to know what the obligations are on you, and you need to know what the obligations are on the vendor, also the supplier, so that you can make sure you're getting the most out of it, and you're treating them correctly as well. Obviously, one of the things with contracts is it's making sure that you've got access to them, but it's making sure they're permanent records. So you might need to refer back to them later, even if they're no longer an active contract or what have you. So I'll just give you some tips for here. So obviously, it's important to have consistency, transparency, control over the whole of the contract management process. It literally, to create a document and have create and document a simple process that anyone within your organization can follow. Anyone within your, assuming lots of people can take up contracts for goods and services, but it's making sure you're all following the same process, and that those are kept up to date, because the last thing you want to do is miss a contract end date, or something to go wrong with the contract and not being aware of what remedies there are for it. Again, and this is, I think this is really the key thing here, is to avoid missing contract notice periods and end dates by diarising those key dates and make sure they're shared with whoever else will need it. If somebody's off on holiday, or somebody's left the organisation, or is off sick, the last thing you want to do is to miss notice periods, because unfortunately suppliers won't take that excuse. So you do need to make sure that that information is readily available for the people to see and to share. With contracts, you've obviously, you've heard of evergreen contracts. Evergreen contracts are those contracts without an end date. I would say to avoid those at all costs, have an end date, maybe 2 or 3 years. Typically for things like mobile phones, it will be 24 months. But you're then in control of it. I mean, the thing about evergreen contracts is that they do favour the supplier as they roll over and over, and it's expected that by having evergreen contracts, organisations are losing between 3 and 5% of the saving opportunities, because they're not reviewing them every 2 or 3 years. And that leads me on to the last point, which is to review the contracts every 2 or 3 years to ensure they're still relevant and accurate, and that you're actually getting the best value for money from them. Any questions, please?
We have got a question that's come through.
Fantastic.
So Sarah's asked a question: what would you recommend as the minimum spend to go to 3 quotes?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. You know what? If it's a quick phone call, it's a quick email to someone. I guess it depends how much time you've got, and from a business perspective, I mean, I'd say probably thousands of dollars, but because the money is so important for you guys, if it's the point of literally just sending an email, copying and pasting an email, or making a phone call, probably hundreds of dollars. Because it would also depend on what the goods and service you're looking for. If it's something that is a standard price and you can go on and it is a standard price, fine. If it's something a little bit more complicated, I would go to 2 or 3, because the other thing about talking to suppliers is they might turn around and tell you something that you didn't know, and you can go, oh, great, thank you very much. There's a better product out there, or there's a better way of doing this. So I hope that helps. But I think it is going to depend on who you are, how much time you've got, and perhaps how much sort of pressure there is on you. Any other questions?
Thanks for that, Adam. That's it for now.
Okay. So the next part of the process is supplier management. Now, supplier management, I guess, is more sort of about compliance, risk, and evaluating performance. So let's have a quick look at this. 65% of procurement leaders say they have limited or no visibility beyond their tier one suppliers. Now, tier one suppliers are their big suppliers, they're their key suppliers. Certainly for businesses, they will be the suppliers that supply directly into the direct spend, as it were, that goes into to provide them the product or service that they provide. So obviously that's going to be the tier one is the key part, but then you've got the tier two, you've got the indirect suppliers. Those are the ones where actually that you are throwing money away because you're not managing those properly, and cumulatively that can result in a quite substantial saving. Excuse me. So again, as with contract management, it's creating a supplier repository. That might be an Excel spreadsheet, it's something in a shared drive, but you're keeping a track of your suppliers, who you're working with, so that your colleagues know who you're working with. And then obviously you've got all the associated supplier documents. Now it might be supplier documents, might be insurance, making sure you're working with companies who have the correct insurance in place, especially if you're outsourcing. It might be accreditations, it might be they've got to be memberships of various different bodies. It might be that they have said that they have certain sustainability accreditations. Now, one of the things about that is obviously that just because you have insurance or an accreditation this year, are they going to have it next year? Maybe it's lapsed, maybe they've lost that accreditation. If that's important to you as an organization, from a risk perspective, you need to make sure that your suppliers are always going to be compliant with with the requirements that you have. And if you're turning around to somebody and going, well, we're working with suppliers that are X or Y, you need to make sure that they really are X or Y and they've got the documentation to prove that. Preferred supplier list, obviously within an organization, if you've got lots of different people, lots of different sites, you can create a preferred supplier list, and that can be known to everyone. They can then go on and make sure that they work with them, rather than repeat the process over and over of every time a different site needs to go and source. If you've done a deal with somebody that can look after all the sites, then they've preferred supplier list. They're then able to go out to them. Your colleagues will then know also that you've done your due diligence on them, that you've got that they are compliant suppliers. And actually, from a supplier perspective, they've put the time and effort in to win your business. Then you're then able to give them. You're able to then take your end of the bar, as it were, and to actually spend the money with them. Performance. One of the things that obviously most suppliers, the only time suppliers hear back generally is when they've made a mistake. If you actually monitor the supplier performance on an ongoing basis, actually it then makes it easier to go to them and say, do you know what, you've done this right, actually this didn't go right. But it also means actually when you come towards the end of a contract, do you want to stay with that incumbent, or is the incumbent awful and you do want to go out and go elsewhere and take your business elsewhere? The risk obviously is, again, I say that your suppliers are not compliant, but you also have the risk, and the risk may be many different things to different people. And it's a question of, you've got to decide, I guess, what you consider risky. I was chatting to someone the other day and they were saying it was about sanctions. Could they deal with this country or that country? And it's like, well, hold on, you need to make sure then that everyone is aware that you can't deal with suppliers from this country or that country. Sustainability, something that's obviously becoming more and more important these days, is sustainability. And certainly I know in the UK, people are looking, when it comes to suppliers, they want to work with suppliers who are making efforts, or who've got accreditations that they are reducing their carbon footprint, etc., etc. Again, if that's one of the values that you've gone out there on, then you need to monitor it and make sure that your suppliers are doing what they've said they're going to do. The other thing is having a supplier onboarding process. So when you have a new supplier, what are you doing? Are you asking somebody to validate them? Are you asking for documentation? Are you asking for insurance documentation? Are you asking for accreditations? Now that's something that you can decide yourselves, but again, it's a process. It reduces your risk if something goes wrong. And then some tips for supplier management. Again, to have consistency, transparency, control over the supplier management, create and document a simple process that everyone can follow. It really can be a couple of steps. It can be as simple as you like, but at least then you're being consistent and everyone is then going to be doing the same thing. It reduces the risk of somebody going rogue. It reduces the risk of putting unnecessarily putting yourselves, I guess, at risk from compliance or whatever else. Keep those records up to date with any documentation, and make sure that it's easily accessible and that your colleagues can collaborate on it. Next thing is, as I mentioned previously, is don't just assume because a supplier has insurance or is compliant 12 months ago, 18 months ago, that they are now. Insurances expire, accreditations expire. It's making sure that they are still valid and that you're able to, they can prove it. And if somebody was to ask you, your supplier, have they got this? Yes, you're able to produce that documentation as well. Review the supplier performance regularly. As I mentioned, it really is important that from a supplier perspective, if they're doing something wrong, they want to know about it so they can try and correct it. And from your perspective, actually, when it comes down to the end of the contract, you don't want to just say, well, they were rubbish, having not given them the opportunity to address the situation. Create the preferred suppliers list, and everyone in the organization knows who you wish to work with. There's always going to be leakage. You're never going to have everyone using the suppliers on that list, but it gives everyone a good guide, and it gives people a little bit of confidence that they're working with the right suppliers. So any questions, Eric?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So let me go on to savings management. So savings management, so reducing costs is the top priority for 76.4% of chief procurement officers, followed closely by improving operational efficiency. Cost has obviously been the #1 priority for the past 10 years for procurement officers. It's becoming, I think, one of those things that's becoming less important because people are now trying to bring ESG in. But from the perspective today, it's actually, if you're trying to make your dollars go further, donors' dollars go further, then you do need to be, reduce those costs as much as possible and to be on top of them. So savings management, it's a question of if you've got the time to monitor projected savings. So again, if you've introduced a new supplier and you believe that there's a cost saving there, cost reduction, maybe from $100 down to $80, it's making sure that actually the supplier does then honor those prices. It might be a cost avoidance. It might be that previously you've bought 10 items. Now, because you've bought a better quality item, you're only buying 5, and there is then a cost avoidance to be considered there. The other thing, obviously, you can do is savings management. It doesn't need to be just for 1 year. You can break it down on a monthly basis. You can break it down to whatever time scales that you would like. Savings management closes off the cycle, as it were, because once you've achieved the savings, that I guess in the simple things, it's the best way of monitoring, the easiest way of monitoring. It's then going back and then running the sourcing activity again, the contract managed supplier management, so that it's cyclical and it's always ongoing. Any questions there?
Not yet, but if anyone's got any, now's
No,
a good time.
it's fine. Okay, so how to make it happen? You've probably listened today, and there's something. I'm hoping there are, even if it's just 1 or 2 bits that you've picked up and thought, you know what, I can go away and do that, and that makes a small difference. Then brilliant, because that's obviously the purpose of this webinar today. I guess how to make it happen, there's 3 ways to do it. You do it yourself, and it probably sounds complicated. It's not complicated. It literally is common sense. But it's a question of putting those processes down and getting everyone else to buy into it, because the more people that buy into it, the more success you're going to have. With the contract management, which I think is one of the key things, is not missing those dates. So if you go away and you can diarize things and make sure that everyone is aware of those dates. I was chatting to somebody the other day who said they'd signed a 1-year contract, but what they'd actually missed was in the contract, in the terms and conditions, very clearly, it said if notice is not given, this contract will automatically renew for another 2 years. Excuse me. So it really is making sure that you know what you've signed up to and that you've got those dates. So that's do it yourself. Work with specialist consultants. I don't know what the energy market is like in Australia at the moment, but certainly in the UK, the energy prices have become very, very expensive, and they're putting a lot of pressure on organisations here. So it's work that, for specialist parts, it's working with experts who know that industry. If you're only running sourcing activities every 2 or 3 years, you can't be expected to be an expert in that and to be aware of latest technology, government regulations, etc. So certain times it's definitely worth working with specialists. And then the last part, and this is, I guess, where Oblu comes in, is to leverage digital solutions. So obviously, any technology is there. It's there to make your lives easier, and it's there to, if there's one person, it means you've got the processes there. One person can do far more using a digital solution than not having it there. So let's just have a look at digital solutions. And this is something that, I guess from a procurement perspective, is something that, can be relevant to, or is relevant to any type of digital solution. Is there are three parts. You've got to look at the processes and outcomes that you've got currently and whether those can be improved at all. The next part is budgets. Do you have tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars to spend on a digital solution? And then the most important part is people. You can go and buy the best digital solution in the world, but if people don't use it, then it becomes redundant and an absolute waste of money and a waste of time. Now, there are some solutions out there that will require consultants, they'll require implementation and an ongoing cost, maintenance, etc. If you haven't got it right and people aren't using it, it becomes a waste of money, and that's something you don't want to have happen. Any questions at all?
Not right now.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce you very briefly to Oblu. So Oblu is the procurement software that I'm involved with, and it was created a couple of years ago. We've got clients across the world, which is fantastic, and it has been designed to take into account the sourcing, the contract management, supplier management, and savings management. It's all in one integrated system, and it has been designed to be simple and intuitive. It's been designed for non-procurement professionals because obviously there's the benefits we've discussed today. Procurement can save a lot of money, it can add a lot of value to a business. So it's making sure that people who aren't procurement people can go in and they can use it. They get alerts. You've got everything stored in one place. You've got those permanent records. And I guess most importantly, you've got that confidence that you're on top of the procurement and you're doing what you can do. So thank you very much. I think we're running a little bit fast, but any questions at all?
We haven't got any questions yet, but I will give people a few minutes just to type them in as we run through the outro here. So thank you very much for that, Adam. That was fantastic. I know it's very early in the morning for you, so well done.
You're right. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, no, that's okay. Very well done. As mentioned, obviously, there is an Oblu. You can get a free trial there. And if you are a Connecting Up or a TechSoup New Zealand member, you can look at getting Oblu pricing there through a partnership with Charity Digital and TechSoup. So have a look through on the Connecting Up website. I'll send through a bit of information about that in the post-webinar email with the recording, so you all can check out the links. For anyone as well that's listening that is maybe thinking they don't have any questions at the moment, but that might come to mind later, that's okay. If you have got questions that crop up down the track, as you're thinking about all this information, don't panic, just send an email to events@connectingup.org. I'm happy to take your questions in. I can pass them on to Adam and we can see if we can get some of those answered offline for you. So yeah, don't have a fuss. It does look like we're not getting any questions in at the moment. So again, just a quick reminder, this webinar, this whole thing was recorded. You'll get a copy of the slide deck that Adam's gone through. So that probably about wraps things up from my end. Adam, is there any last words from
No, I
your
was
side
going to say, I hope that what I've said today, there might be one or two things that people have taken from today and gone, do you know what? That's simple. That's an easy thing we can do. And yes, you're right. Actually, yes, I have missed a contract renewal. Yes, I have, have done this, haven't done that. It is simple. It really is simple. But it's a question of doing it. And actually, by doing these simple things, you really can make your donors' dollars go further because you're not wasting money with suppliers. And as somebody who supports charities here in the UK, I like to think that every penny, pound, cent, dollar that I donate is actually spent on the frontline delivery and not wasted with third-party suppliers. So yeah, I genuinely hope that you've been able to take a couple of, one or two tips out of this today that will make a difference and have an impact on your charities.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, I think we will end a little bit early here. So for everyone here that's attending, thank you very much for coming along today. It was great to see you. Hope to see you again in the future. Enjoy having a little bit of your afternoon back. And Adam, enjoy being able to go back to sleep.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.